Okay, welcome to a Father's Flame podcast today. I'm excited to introduce my new guest, Dan Peterson. Welcome to the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Looking forward to talking to you a little bit more.
Yeah, I got to share that, we were connected through Larry Hagner, and I went and watched a podcast he did with him. And me and my wife listened to it actually while we're heading up onto a ski trip.
Oh,
And man,
nice.
I'm very excited about what you're going to share because we definitely resonated with some of the approaches you had and the mindset you had during that podcast. So why don't you tell us about what you're doing and who is Dan Peterson?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm a dad of three kids. I have almost a 17-year-old son, 13-year-old daughter, 11-year-old son. I've been married for, it'll be 24 years this year. Professionally, I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I've been a child therapist probably for close to 25 years now. But over the last 10 years, I've kind of switched from direct care for kids to parent coaching. And the reason I did that is mainly because when kids are struggling, like behaviorally, emotionally, there's a lot of resources for them. There's psychiatrists, there's therapists, there's specialized schools, there's social workers, there's treatment teams. But what I found, and it's interesting too, because I kind of came to this fork in the road when I became a parent. It just was really apparent to me that the parents are the most integral part of the treatment team, and they're the ones that are oftentimes left out. And they're relying on all these other adults to fix their kids, so to speak. And what I found is if you can equip the parents with the right set of tools and strategies, like the healing happens within the home, within the relationship between the parent and child, and kids get better much quicker, and it's much more sustainable.
That's interesting. So
Mhm.
is it more like you start with a healthy marriage and healthy perspective, like towards kids? Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah,
interested to hear more about this.
yeah, starting with marriage, starting with your relationship with God, starting with your relationship with yourself. Like the work I do is all relationship based, but specifically, it's the relationship between the parent and child.
Okay.
Kids are not created with any idea about who they are, how to function in the world, what's important, what's not. They actually learn that from the environment that they're raised in. And if you're not aware of how to really equip kids to be strong on the inside, um, how to love themselves, how to love others, which is really the way that we're designed. Sometimes we teach them the opposite, or we teach them things that we're not really proud of, and it's not even intentional. It's just our default system.
Well, we gotta talk about that right there. How do we teach
Sure.
them that?
Yeah. So just kind of an overview here, and I'll kind of give you
Yeah.
like the 30,000 foot view, then we'll get a little bit more specific. But I'm certified in an approach called the nurtured heart approach. A guy named Howard Glasser designed this approach probably 40 years ago now, but it's kind of the heartbeat of what I do. And it's really focused on three key tenets. And if you think about a tripod, all three of
Yeah.
these tenets are just as important as the other one. So the way we go about doing this from like the top down is you have to be really, really aware of where your energy, your attention, your connection is with your kids. We're always teaching our kids something, whether it's intentionally or not. And it's just oftentimes by what we pay attention to, what we respond and react to. So the three kind of key components of this is how do you build your child up on the inside, give a lot of attention, a lot of connection to the things that are going well, and so that you're building up a value-driven kid. That's kind of one tenet. The next one is how do you not accidentally shoot yourself in the foot over and over again by connecting to problems, which is
Interesting.
very difficult to do if you love your kid because when they do things wrong, you're going to react to that. You're going to be compelled to discipline, to teach them, to try to intervene. And inadvertently, what you're doing is connecting to problems. And sometimes kids get the message, if we're not careful, that I am a problem because when I behave that way, I get tons of passion and energy and connection from my parents. So you have to
Hmm.
get really good at starving that. And then the third tenet, which just based on your reaction right there, that's the hardest part for everyone. It requires
I'm
an
I'm
immense amount of patience and self control and self awareness.
I'm literally thinking of a scenario from this morning that we'll probably get into. But what is that
Sure.
third tenet?
The third is just absolute clarity with where the line is. And if you cross the line, there's accountability, but it's not you're in trouble and you're bad. It's you made a mistake. How do you recover and learn from that? And it's kind of similar to how a referee officiates, a basketball game. If you step out of bounds, whether it's an inch or 20 feet, the ref just blows a whistle and says out of bounds. And what happens is the player learns how to dribble, how to pay attention to the out of bounds, how to look forward, how to scan the court. Like all those skills develop when they become more aware of what those boundaries are. So it's meant to teach and train. It's not meant to make you pay. So when you have all three of those stands kind of working in unison, what you do, especially for kids that struggle behaviorally, is you help them see themselves as valued, as competent, as equipped, and you don't give any unnecessary drama and energy to these problems. And because you care and love for them, you hold them accountable. Like their confidence grows up, their skills grow up, their ability to navigate life and improve. So parents that get a hold of this and really, really learn how to master it, like things get better so much faster, whether you have a challenging kid or not. It just helps them reach their potential and their God-given gifts.
Yeah, I like how you're saying like a ref blows the whistle. Like, um,
Yeah,
I I did interview Sean Donahue, the family coach, and he was like something that
I
stuck
listened
with
to
me
that
is
one this morning.
yeah, he's like
Yeah,
parenting is the most emotional thing you'll ever do. And ever since he
yeah,
said that, like that second, I was like, that's so right. But when you said a ref, he clearly knows the rules and he's just blowing a whistle. He's not like mad at you that you stepped out of bounds. Like
yeah.
there's emotion out of it. So I'm kind of really intrigued by what you're saying, like having real good clarity on where the boundaries are. And then I don't have to be this dad that's like, what is going on? Like it's just like, oh, out of bounds, you get whatever this. So, anyways, I don't know. I want you to dig deeper into that.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you this: it's easy. I shouldn't say easy. It's more realistic for the ref to remain emotionally neutral because they're super clear first and foremost where their role is and where the player's role is. And I know for me, when I start to get derailed and get worked up when my kids misbehave, it's because I'm starting to veer into their lane and I'm either taking their behavior personal or I'm worn out or I've tolerated stuff for way too long. I mean, could you imagine if a ref chased a player down the court and was like, look out, if you step out of bounds, you're going to be grounded, or that's the 10th time I told you to not do that. Now you're kicked out of the game. Like
Yeah,
it's
that'd be
just
crazy.
ridiculous, but that's
Yeah,
how we parent, right? So,
interesting.
so when I'm the most effective and when I'm the most emotionally neutral is when I have the mindset of you are free to choose to stay in or stay out, to obey or disobey. My job is not to convince you or control you. My job is just to hold you accountable and let you see the pros and the cons. And if I have tools to help me do that, it's a lot easier for me to remain neutral. If I'm relying on my default system or what I was raised with, or just how I feel that day or society, I'm much more erratic. I'm much less emotionally neutral. Um, there's a
So,
lot more
how
that
did
goes into that, but yeah, what are
yeah?
your thoughts so far?
How does a parent like create these guidelines and boundaries or core values, or what does this method call that?
Yeah, so would it be helpful if we kind of broke down those three
Y-
stands?
Yeah, yeah. Let's let you take the reins on this. I'm gonna be the student here learning. So I
Okay.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and just interject questions or stop me if you need to, because when I do these trainings, it's like a 6-hour full day training for a big audience, so I can get going on a tangent here real quickly.
Oh,
But
okay.
so when you look at how do you build your child up on the inside, how do you connect to them? I want you just to look at everything that matters is what's happening in the moment. It doesn't matter what happened yesterday or 5 minutes ago. It doesn't matter what's going to happen next. If you're fully focused and zoned in on what is happening right here and now, that's where you're going to have the most bang for your buck. So um, the place I like to have parents start is come up with 5 character traits that are really important to you personally. It's the type of person you want to be. It's the type of child you want to raise. And if you can come up with those 5 character traits, um, that's going to be your kind of guideline and your focus over the next couple weeks. So, for example, give me a couple traits that are important to you as a dad or as a person.
I like honesty. I like serving other people. Like I love seeing that in our kids. Um, I like communication, even like instead of just kids just being super quiet. Like I
Mhm.
want to hear their heart. I like to see them actually be active. You know.
So what's kind of standing out to me, just as you're saying that, I asked you for traits, and you're telling me the ones you like. There's an emotional
Yeah.
connection to that, right? And
Yeah.
this is why I always start with this, asking parents, what are your traits? Because if you value it, when you see your kids demonstrating that, you're going to have an emotional response to that, and it's going to be a
Yeah.
positive emotional response. However, what prompts you to talk to your kids about honesty?
When they're lying.
Yeah.
I,
And that's the huge paradigm shift, right?
yeah.
Is you connect to your kid about honesty when they're doing the thing that triggers you, when
Hmm.
that causes you distress. And so, how are you going to be patient and non emotionally invested when you're triggered, when you're worried, when you're concerned, and they're doing something that violates something that's very central to you? That's one component. The second component is when you're lecturing your kid on the importance of honesty right after they were lying. How open are they to your words of wisdom?
Not even sure they're listening. I mean, they're they're listening, but I don't know if they're hearing it.
Yeah, and this is like when I first started learning about this and started implementing it. It's like the veil came off my eyes, and I was like, oh, no wonder this isn't working. Um, no wonder I'm so reactive. No wonder it's hard for me to remain calm. It's the timing is wrong. The time to talk about honesty is when you have evidence in real time of your kids being honest, because your heart's going to have an emotional reaction to that. You're going to be proud. You're going to be excited. You're going to like take pride in your kid. And then when you speak to them, it's like, what's one of your kids' names?
Oldest is Isaiah.
So, like Isaiah, I see you being really honest. You could have lied to me, but you told me the truth. That shows a lot of integrity. Like there's emotion and intellect that's connecting. There's a lot of energy around
Hmm.
it, and your kid is very open to receive that feedback because they're being encouraged and complimented rather than disciplined, punished, shamed. So that's the first part of this approach, is really getting clear about what your values are, what those character traits are, and then holding yourself accountable to be on the lookout for the times where that's actually happening. And when you connect to your kid during those moments, there's a completely different energy shift. And when I say energy, I'm not talking about like meditation or new age energy. I'm just talking about like emotional human connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. You're right. There's a different energy to in the positive when things are good. And I have seen my kids do stuff. And I'm like, oh my goodness, my oldest son is like serving the other kids and like playing with
Yeah.
them, and it's like good. And then an hour later, I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you just you were doing so good. But I don't think I
Yeah.
affirmed every time I seen it. But you're right. I did feel something, and I was like,
Yeah.
man, look good on you, Isaiah.
Hmm. Well, and here's the other thing too is there's probably 90% of the time where our kids are doing the right thing, or are showing integrity or honesty or kindness, but we don't see it because it's not something that's out of the ordinary. That moment that you're talking about with Isaiah, like that probably wasn't something you see all day every day. It was something maybe that was above and beyond.
Correct.
Typically, so the way our brains are wired is when things are going well, our brain just powers down and says you don't need to attend to that because it's taken care of. However, when something goes wrong, your brain turns on and says go correct it.
Yep.
And unless it's something that's out of the ordinary, we're going to miss a vast majority of the time our kids are showing up and showing these qualities, unless we tell ourselves to see it.
Wow. So how do I tell myself to see it? And to now that you're saying this is exactly what stood out the most when you were talking with Larry and where me and my wife are listening to this. And I think you were talking about like um, really challenging kids even do positive
Yeah.
things. And it's like
Oh, yeah.
focus on the positive things. And I'm like, I don't do that. Like, how do I get that? I want that habit. And it's like, I'm not even living up to the values I was telling you earlier, where I said communicate. I
Yeah.
value those, but I don't necessarily do them even like the way I want.
Yeah. So, first of all, give yourself a break here. This isn't because you don't want to or because you're not trying or you're not invested. Has nothing to do with neglect. It's really two part. It's one, the way that God designed our brains, which when I get to heaven, that's the very first question I'm asking him. I already told him that. That part of our brain is really helpful. You were a retired fireman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
really
retired
helpful
over
if the
over.
fire alarm goes off, right? That part of your
Sure.
brain gets triggered and says either go put the fire out or go to safety. That
Yeah.
same part of your brain turns on when your kids are dishonest or are
Mm.
unkind. It's the fight or flight center of our brain that because you care and love for your kid, when you see them stepping out of bounds, you see that the path they're on is going to cause pain for them. So because you care and love them, you're going to be drawn to go address it. However, it's the worst possible time to do the teaching and to provide connection and energy, because what you're doing is you're connecting to the very thing you don't want more of. And you're
Hmm.
inadvertently sending the message to your kid that this is how I see you. This is who you are. You're dishonest. You're unkind. You're not actually saying those words, but that's the way our kids receive that connection.
It's
So,
it That's interesting. It seems like there's so many things wrong is because one, I'm not even in the right state to teach like from a real positive, heartfelt way. I'm a little worked up. They're not listening. And then you just said, which is something I haven't ever thought about, is I'm connecting to, or I'm like pointing out the bad thing, and I didn't inadvertently, right, by
yeah,
addressing it at that time.
yeah.
And so what is that doing to the kids? Like you said earlier that now they possibly think that, oh, I'm a problem. Oh, I'm a this bad kid. I'm I don't know. I guess they're finding their identity in that.
Yeah, if we're not careful, um, I think kids are pretty resilient. It's not like you connect to the problem a few different times and all of a sudden they're damaged for life. I think God designed it to be a little bit
Thank
more resilient than
thank
that. Thank
God.
God. But if it's a constant theme where they're hearing it over and over and over again, day in and day out, it does become part of their narrative or their story or their self identity. Because again, kids aren't born with a concept of who they are. They're given that based on how the world shows up to them, primarily
Right.
the parents. And you asked a few minutes ago, like, how do you hold yourself accountable, or how do you train yourself to do it? For me, it's like learning a new language. The first time I was in high school and I took Spanish class, the teacher didn't give me the whole book and say, memorize this book, come back tomorrow and speak Spanish. She said, here's 5 vocabulary words. Practice those every single day for the next week. Master those, and I'll give you some more. So, what I have parents do is make a list of those 5 traits, pick one word a day, and say, I'm going to point out to my kids at least 5 to 10 times today when I see them showing this quality. And if you train yourself to be on the lookout for it, it's amazing how you start to see it in abundance.
That I just heard something about that this week. I forget the name of it, but as soon as it's in your mind and on your mind, it's like, "Hey, I wanna buy a Tesla." Okay, well, now I see Teslas everywhere.
Yeah. Yep.
But, like, my kids, like, maybe I'm focused on the negative things they're doing and correcting so much that I'm seeing the negative things everywhere, and I've diminished all those good things.
Hmm.
Um, so that okay, that makes sense. So start off slow, get your 5 words of Spanish in, like, "Hey, point,"
Yeah.
you said, "Point out those things." Yeah, okay. This is kinda making
What?
sense to me.
Yeah. So, like, in just even taking that a step further, you said honesty, communication. What was one of the other traits you were saying?
Uh,
Servanthood.
yeah, if they're
Help.
serving other people,
So when in the last 24 hours has one of your kids shown service or servanthood, even if it's in a small amount?
I saw one of my older daughter playing with my younger daughter, or, the kids will play together. Um, it's
So
been a rough 24 hours with the older 2 boys, but
yeah, right. Well, so and this is why you need all three of these stands, because even as you're
yeah,
trying to connect to that, you're still kind of being flooded with the thoughts of where things did not go well. So let's just kind of zone in a little bit more on that moment where your oldest is playing. Like, what did you see? What was she doing that was being helpful or playful?
she was just focusing on her little sister, and I don't remember if they were sitting on the couch or just playing with the same toys. Um, Something in the living room that they were playing with together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's just what you say out loud is like, hey, I see that you're sitting on the couch with your sister. You guys are playing with the same toys. She's younger than you. That's you being a servant. And what you're doing is
That's
you're
awesome.
saying out loud the
Yeah.
evidence that's happening in real time, and then you're just attaching these traits. And what happens is that when the kids hear that over and over and over again, you're starting to prove to them that that's who they truly are, because here's all the evidence to support the truth.
That's awesome. That I
And you
and
can
that
you can do
just
that right now, right? Like, there.
now that you said it, yeah, I could do that right now, but I'm like, well, I don't do it. I haven't said those things. I just watch it, and you're right. It's like my inner voice says it,
Mhm.
but nothing came out of here, so they got no idea.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Hmm. So I guess I'm really caught up. I'm like, this is kind of deep to me in the sense that, like, I, I maybe inadvertently have connected them to their problem behaviors because I have reacted to those more than I have reacted to the positive things. So, how long does it? I don't know. I guess I have a couple questions. Like, you said kids are resilient, but, like, how much damage have I done to my kids essentially? Like, and I feel like my oldest kid, I've known the least about how to be a good dad or whatever, right? And he's had to, like,
Yeah.
bear up through these 13 years of I'm figuring stuff out. And I think it's different for my 3-year old,
Yeah. It's so interesting. And the reason I'm smiling at this is because the first time that I was kind of introduced to this approach and these concepts, I had the exact same reaction. Well, I had this kind of interesting. My first reaction was like all this anger. I would say I was on borderline rage because I'd been working with like the most challenging kids on the planet. I was working in residential hospital systems for kids that were teenagers, DCFS wards of the state, just kids that were traumatized, and they were too dangerous to be in foster care. They were too young to be in juvie. So they come live at this hospital for 3 years. And,
hmm,
I was just thinking, like, how in the world do I have a master's in clinical psychology with a specialty in child psychology, been in this field for 15 years, and nobody's told me about this? I was really angry, and then it shifted towards what you're describing is like this guilt. I'm like, oh crap, what have I done? I've damaged all these kids. What's really really important is that you, your kids need to be affirmed and encouraged and need to hear their father's voice. And even if you haven't been doing it right or you've been messing it up or you're kind of 50-50, if you go to your kids today and say, you know what, I didn't realize this. My intention was good, but I think I've been paying too much attention to when you guys make mistakes. So from this point on, I'm going to be training myself to really connect and say and speak when I see you doing the right thing because that's truly who you are. It's just like the skies open up, like their heart opens up and all their because that's the way God designed them. And then you start feeding them that way. It's like don't worry about what happened in the past. What worry or what you can focus on is speaking that truth from this point on. And that's why I say kids are resilient. I'm like, oh, that sounds great. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, they ah yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and Jeff, let me just add a little piece to that. The reason I do the parent coaching is because kids that have this negative view of themselves or they're so used to getting connection and energy through adversity, going to see a therapist and talking about your problems reinforces it.
Hmm.
Going to a psychiatrist and getting on medicine communicates you can't control yourself. We need a medicine to do that for you. Having a specialized treatment team says you get all this love and attention for the most compassionate people on the planet because you're a challenge, right? So continuing that model doesn't usually promote change. I mean, sometimes it does, but usually it's just insignificant amounts of improvement or a lot of the same. But when you equip parents and teachers and therapists with this model, that's why improvement happens rapidly because they're like looking for that kind of affirmation. Somebody has just revealed to me my greatness. It's healing. It really is, and it happens really, really quickly for kids.
I think this is exciting to hear as a parent, and hopefully a lot of other parents. So, where does the nurtured heart approach? So, like, is this where does it? This guy just came up with it. I mean, does it derive itself from somewhere else? I mean,
Yeah, the guy, his name's Howard Glasser.
okay,
He was a family therapist, and it's funny. He kind of developed this method based on a couple things. One is his life as a very challenging child. He drove everybody crazy. And his training as a therapist, it's like typically what happens is when kids go into treatment or go into therapy or there's family therapy, the therapist says, so how'd this week go? The parent says maybe a couple positive things, but then they get into all the problems. And usually the tools that we're given as therapists is we try to break down those problems, come up with better plans. And generally kids aren't open to participating in that because we just like started the conversation with what you did wrong. And in what he was just starting to experience is like these kids are not getting better. There's a lot of tension, and more importantly, we're spending 90% of our session on what went wrong. Did 90% of the week really go wrong if we were to kind of track day to day, minute to minute? The truth is 90% of the time things are going well or problems are not happening. It's just there's this huge emotional and energy connection around the problems, and it feels that way. So he just said we need a set of tools or like a mindset or a framework to flip that. And unless you're trained with some specific tools to do that, you're probably just going to react and try to put problems out all day.
interesting. So, is a lot of the breakthrough and the change happening from the parent changing to focus? I'm trying to understand this here in the moment. Focusing
Okay.
on the positive and speaking into the positive. Am I breaking this down right?
Yeah, and but that's a third of it.
That's a third of it.
The
Okay.
three stands, that's one third of it. And again, like a tripod, you pull one of these stands away, the whole thing's going to collapse.
Okay. So
So,
let's repeat the three things so it's building up on the inside, like the value driven. I have written down stop connecting to problems, and then getting clarity on where the lines are.
Yeah, and let me even simplify that so it's easier to remember. Um, and we use the three stands because it's really about taking a stand because this is not easy to do. But it's a personal stand. This is how I'm going to connect and show up. It's absolutely yes. I'm going to see what's going well and I'm going to connect to you. Absolutely no. I'm not going to connect to any unnecessary drama. And absolute clarity. I know where the line is, and I will hold you fiercely accountable because I believe you're capable. So absolutely yes, absolutely no, absolutely clear is.
Got it. I like that. Okay, so he's developed this process, and you said it's like the change happens quickly. It's not easy, but as you're implementing the four stands, like how long is it taking, like say for like the extremely difficult kids to see progress or change?
Yeah. So my specialty is coaching parents to learn and master this. So I have a 90-day period
Okay.
where I'm really leading and helping parents learn and master this approach over a 3 month or a 90-day period. That seems to be the amount of time it really takes them to learn, integrate, and kids are their BS meters are pretty high. They can tell if you're just saying it because you want them to behave better versus you're really speaking from your heart, you're speaking truth. So in the beginning it's kind of mechanical and you're kind of talking differently, and it's kind of exhausting because you're used to reacting and now you're not doing that anymore. It takes a lot of self-control, but generally over a 90-day period is when you see the transformation. But within 4 to 5 weeks is when you start to see everything starting to shift. You start to see your kid more self-controlled and regulated, and they're starting to crave that positive connection. Basically,
Hmm.
I tell parents, if like after 4 to 5 sessions of you really being consistent about implementing this, if you're not seeing change, it's probably a sign that your kid can't control themselves and they might need some support. But I would say easily 95% of the families I work with, they start seeing improvement within those 4 to 5 weeks.
Yeah, this sounds great. Great
Yeah.
program. What, like, should people that they're have young kids or gonna have kids like do some a program like this? I'm like, can it be preventative? Like you teach the skill ahead of time where, like for me, I'm over here like, geez, what have I didn't done wrong all these years? Well, what about the person that's like, well, we're about to have kids or we have a 1-year old and we're not doing a whole ton of like diverse parenting, but does it
Yeah.
is there a program? Is that work for like an educational piece for?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question because I think I learned, if I got my timing right, I think I learned about this approach and got trained in this approach when my firstborn was about 1 years old. I
Okay.
think I was like fully trained and started my own business when he was probably one. So from like his whole childhood, he's been kind of raised in a home that models this approach. Um, what I would say is the families that I work the most with are probably preschool through the late elementary years, like three to
Oh,
12. That
interesting.
seems to be the sweet spot. I do work with middle school and high school families, but the the kids that are seeking the most connection from their parents are usually in 3 to 4 years old up to 12. Once they get to middle school and high school, their social groups become a little bit more important.
Okay.
So yeah, it's never too late. I mean, shoot, there's a lot of trainers in this approach that use this as their coaching model when they do executive coaching for teams. I think this is the way that God kind of designed us to operate in relationships, like encourage, build each other up. Don't get stuck in the drama and the negativity and what happened yesterday. And then because you care and love for someone, hold them accountable. Have good boundaries. Like that's when relationships operate that way, they're the most healthy. I also know a couple trainers that do marriage retreats because when you show up to your wife or your spouse this way, your marriage is much better.
Interesting. So have you seen, like, because you've implemented this longer than most people, like the contrast of your family or your kids versus people are just winging it for the whole time and won't get help or coaching?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Um, and the reason I say that is because I have two kids that are thriving. I have one that's driving me crazy right now.
Hey, we're getting
um,
raw here then. Get the
yeah,
real
and
Dan
it,
Peterson.
yeah. So this doesn't learning this approach and this model does not create immunity from having problems. Your kids have free
Yeah.
choice. They have a free will, and I think for me, when like right now, my daughter's the one that's making some choices that are. She's 13. She's in middle school for the first time. 13-year-old girls, the pressure that they're under is a lot different than what my boys are, especially with like social media and just um, clicks and stuff like that. But I, when I talk to friends of mine about what's kind of going on with my daughter, all of them like my daughter did that. I would, lock her in the house. I would, get her in a corner and I'd scream and I'd yell and she'd never have privilege. Like, because I have this model, I can show up in a way that,
Yeah.
that whole referee where I'm not emotionally attached to what she's doing. And our relationship over the last 6 months has never been better. Like,
That's
she's
awesome.
making some really hard decisions and she's learning some really rough lessons right now. But our relationship is not deteriorated because of that. And if we can weather those storms and she can know that she's deeply loved and cared for by her dad, and no matter what she does, that never changes, I believe that's the gift. That's the calling of fatherhood.
Yeah, you brought up the ref thing again, and something that stuck out that you said earlier was you said like we're stop trying to convince them and control them. Do you see that? I think that's what one struggle is that you like, to be honest, like I think I'm trying to control too much, and that you said like we're given free will, like you just that's like a losing battle no matter what. If you're trying to control a person, like we shouldn't parent that way, but I think I'm inadvertently doing that. Uh, it keeps coming to my mind as we're talking here.
Yeah. Well, like, quite honestly, Jeff, when I'm stressed, I definitely go into control mode because if I can get you to stop, then my stress goes down. I feel
Yeah, you're
better. I'm more
controlling your
regulated.
environment.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of daily work for me. Listen, I coach parents. I do this for a living. Um, I'm still human. There's days I don't sleep well. There's days I'm caught off guard. There's things my kids do that surprise me, but when I have a model or a set of tools that I can lean on, especially during those times, there's a lot less regret that I have and a lot more like assurance that regardless of what they do, I'm standing and leading in the way that God's called me to.
Yeah, and then so you can be at peace saying, "Hey, I'm going to be this irremovable pillar for my family. This is my zone that I'm going to, I'm the ref. I don't need to like go and go critique their form in the middle of a game, and it's not that. It's like I'm going to play my role." Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I keep going back to the emotional thing, but so I can be less emotional if I'm in this role.
Yeah.
But
Well, and I think too, one thing you said that I think it's important to it. This isn't about controlling kids. I think most parents would say like, yeah, I don't want to control my kid. But if I was to say to you, you can't control your kid, like for most people, that kind of triggers like incompetence. Like, oh yeah, I can. But I don't think like that's the way that we're designed. My hope is I can teach my kids how to control themselves, how to make wise decisions, how to learn from their mistakes. If I can do that, then I have a lot more peace and assurance that I'm staying in my lane and communicating that I trust that you have what it takes and that if you make mistakes, you're going to learn from that. Now, there's sometimes I can do that really, really well. There's other times, I'm lecturing, I'm giving my kids, my most passionate speeches and my words of wisdom right after they screwed up. And I know nothing's sinking in, but I can't help myself.
It feels right to you,
Yeah,
but maybe
yeah. Yeah,
I'm
I mean, I think there's a part of me that thinks like if I just say it enough times, it will finally sink in. But I've never had a kid. I've never had my own children or even a client of mine say, you know what, Dad, that's right. I never ever thought of it that way. Thank you for those words of wisdom. Like I had no idea I shouldn't lie to my teacher. You know what? Now that you've brought it to my attention, I'm like
I'm
I'm
gonna
in a better
change my
place.
ways now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually in one ear out the other, or they're coming up with every excuse in the book of why it wasn't their fault.
Yeah. That's just it makes parenting feel, and it really is just this like there's some really good highs, and it's just this journey you're on, and it's always taking work. It's I feel like sometimes I want to get focused on other things. It's like, wow, why are we going back to like and reverting to having to teach you this? And it's like, let's get forward. And I don't, it's just not like what I have this false vision of it. Um, anyways, no,
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're sharing. I think these are awesome tools, um, and a framework. So, is there like a community that you are developing, or is there one that, okay, people that, because you said you had a community of men that are kind of trying and growing, or something like that?
Well, are you talking about like just for like me in my personal life? Like, what am I doing to surround myself with other dads? Or are you talking about like the nurtured heart approach, the parent coaching, my business piece?
Like, I guess I was talking about both, but I think you had mentioned maybe it's more of a personal thing that your mindset is more, do I want to be around other men that are doing this?
Yeah, well, like for me, like just personally, how I'm getting input in my life as a dad, I'm doing that through the Dad's Edge, which is with Larry Hagner,
Yeah.
the guy that connected us. But for the parent coaching, I have my own business where I have a coaching model that I train and equip parents to learn and integrate this into their home life, into their relationship with their kids, and whether
And
that's
what's the name of
parents that
that?
it's called the Compass for Life.
The Compass for
That's
Life.
yeah,
And
that's
where
the
do
name of
people
my
find you,
business.
Dan?
That's my website. So it's the Compass. It's the number four life.com. Um, that's the best way to get information on the work that I do, and I
Okay.
have a lot of like free resources. I would say if somebody wants to learn more, should get on my newsletter. Just go to my homepage and sign up. Get like some free resources, a free book for parents. But then they get lots of tools and tips on how to integrate this and really just equip them as parents.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean that's a real passion kind of mine. Is I love talking to guys like you. I love learning from and finding these, like, call them frameworks or structures, or how you had called it something else earlier, but learning these strategies and having tools, right? Is I, that might become my biggest passion, is the fact that just getting the word out there is like, you're not the best husband, dad, any of that stuff. So business leader, entrepreneur, any of it, go learn from other people, like how change the mindset to say, and because I had this mindset, oh no,
Mm-hmm.
I could figure out, parenting, like I said, with, I got the Bible, I got God, I'm kind of a smart guy. And it's like that approach has not served me well, even in my marriage. I'm like, I could figure this out. How hard could it be? You
Yeah.
know, um,
It,
where,
that's funny you say that because I don't know if it's a male thing or whatever, but it's like just because your intention is good doesn't mean your execution is going to be good.
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like like when you said, like I have the Bible, I have my relationship with God. Like those are great resources. But if you don't apply it, if you don't get other people like like-minded people around you, encouraging you and helping you grow, like you know, we're not meant to live in caves in isolation.
There you go. And there's something right about what I said, but there's also something wrong about it. And what is right is I do think God, he lives up to what he says. And he says, hey, ask for wisdom and I'll give it to you. Um, but there's this aspect that if the relationship with God was like all you needed and you never needed anyone else, well, that would violate other parts of his word where he says, no, you're a
Yeah,
family, you're a community, you're my family. Like you're
yeah,
not supposed to, the hand, if you're all part of the body part, the hand can't say, oh, I don't need you, foot, I don't need you, head, and it's like nothing about self-sufficiency is is what we're really designed for is kind of what I'm learning. Although I would never say that, I don't think, but but I act that way, so I must believe it. And
yeah,
like I'm always battling the, oh, I can do this. I'm fine. I don't need to tell Dan my problems. I'll get through it, and it really, that, like I said, it's just never served me well.
yeah. And it's, I mean, quite honestly, that's something I struggle with every week. If I didn't have, I think, a group of guys where I had to check in with on a weekly basis, it would be. There'd be times where I go months or years without telling people where I'm really at or what I'm really needing.
Hmm.
Well, it's
Interesting. So you must go to church too, then, Dan? Is that part of your
yeah.
life?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on like how should like that accountability be? Should it be different like at church? This is a pretty loaded big question, but I feel like we have such an amazing resource of people that meet literally so consistently every
Yeah,
weekend. And then it's like some of those people you see the most, but you don't know them that well. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Or you can't get into struggles, right? It's just got to be like this positive thing. You get it, of things that you talk about. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. Um, I need to think about that one because the church that we currently go to, it's a little bit smaller. So a lot of like the men's ministries or men group stuff, it happens on times that I can never make because of just family commitments or responsibilities with my kids. So, I was actually talking to another guy about this a couple months ago. He's like, when would be a convenient time for you to meet? Like, if you wanted to come to our men's group? Because Saturday mornings are off the table. That's when my kids are always playing sports or I'm coaching.
Yeah.
And then, and I just said, how about like any day during the week around noon? And they're like, well, that works good for you because you're self-employed, but that doesn't work good for anybody else. So I think we're in a little bit of a smaller church, so there's not a whole lot of time for me to deeply connect with other men and gain that accountability just from a scheduling point of view.
That's
Um,
interesting.
but that's my local church that I go to and that I'm invested in. Like the men's group that I'm doing, I've always been able to find a men's group where I can get spiritual input and accountability. I can get, the dad edge is really good about providing how can I be the best dad, how can I be the best husband, the best business leader, and then there's all these tracks for if you want to focus on your relationship with God, if you want to not focus on the relationship with God. So I've just been pretty creative at finding that. Or
How long have you
there's
been
even
a
been
part of
times
that?
where I've been, um, probably say maybe 18 months, probably a year and a half. Yeah.
And what are some of the top benefits you're saying of the data edge? So your accountability, you said, and it's consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much. And whether it's, the dad edge or, other men's group, it's for me, I work from home. I work virtually. That's where I do a lot of my coaching. So it creates community for me. It's very easy for me to isolate myself just because I'm not going to a school or a hospital. Um, it's very focused on how do I improve my relationship with my wife and with my kids. So I'm around other guys that have the same goals and vision. I mean, I'm a parent coach. Family's everything to
Yeah.
me. And being around guys that have a shared vision, like it just immediately kind of creates vulnerability and safety to talk about this stuff. Um, and then I'm on a specific track for business owners, so it's all for entrepreneurs. So how do I market? How do I get my word out there? How do I get connected with other podcast leaders
Yeah.
and other like-minded men? So it just creates a lot of support and networking for the areas that I'm wanting to grow and needing help.
Oh, that's awesome. I think that like-mindedness, it's not like you're soldiers, but it's kind of like you're going to war in a sense. Like there's that
Totally.
target, like
Mm-hmm.
like you almost don't need to talk about it, but it's like, dude, we need to get better. We need to get prepared. The battle's here, and or maybe we're in it, and we're just you know regrouping. But I like that. I'm a part of a couple communities too, where it's and actually they're more entrepreneurial Christian people. There seems to be a
Yeah.
slight difference in mentality, in like maybe a quarter of your life from like, people that have a job, and I've been there, and people that are self-employed or, own a business.
Mm-hmm.
Although you can unite in faith and families, but there is that little bit of different drive um, when you bring in how you make money. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's cool. Well, have you? I always think like when I'm hearing people share some kind of new idea to me, like, okay, where is that in the Bible? Have you with this like nurtured heart approach? And we've said a few times, like, I think that's how God designed things to be, because you can use this approach and it works actually good in your business. It works good in your marriage. Um, have you, being a practitioner and coach, seen that, this is actually very biblical?
Oh yeah, for sure. I got my training, my clinical training. It wasn't at a faith-based college, so it was very um, humanistic, so to speak. But all the tools that I use, if it's not congruent with Scripture, I don't practice it. And I think
Gotcha.
what's really interesting too is that, like, what I've found is the things that work in my field, they work for a reason. And whether it's quoted in, like, giving credit to Scripture or not, you're going to find the truth, and it's
Yeah.
going to be founded in Scripture. So, this idea of how do you build your kid up on the inside. There's tons of Scripture that talks about encouraging your kid and the fruits of the Spirit being love and joy and peace, and don't um, get angry but don't sin. Don't bring your child to anger. Don't correct them out of anger. Like, this isn't rocket science,
Yeah.
right? Don't yell at your kid. Don't get angry and sin. Like, okay, so that's the way that God wants us to operate. What does that look like in parenting? Well, that means when they misbehave, you don't. Have you ever said this to your kids? Why do I have to yell to get your attention? Or yell at them to stop yelling?
Or what, I gotta like clap my hands to get you to look at me like when I'm talking to you, like, huh? Yeah,
Yeah. But I think there's a lot of scripture on that. The Lord, the Bible says God disciplines those that He loves.
yeah.
There's all kinds of, like, if you don't discipline your kid, you're crippling them.
Well, I think it says you hate them if you don't.
Yeah.
Proverbs says that.
So I think the three stands or the tenets of this approach are firmly grounded in Scripture, and I think just the application and the tools really help you put it into practice in a way that's going to align with your faith. If that's something that's important to you.
Oh, that's good. There's a gentleman by the name of Bishop Malcolm. I can't remember, but he was saying how there is a lot of like the self help and improvement stuff. They've kind of taken what's the word? So there's psychology about it, there's theology about it, but in this current era, it's like they're taking the theology that it really comes from the Bible, a lot of like self-help and betterment stuff. And it's like, anyway, so I like hearing that conversation. And it, personally, as a believer, like I think God did give us a lot of the tools in the scripture, even though I can't see them all and I can't
Mhm.
pull it all out and do it all perfectly. Just so much there to reinforce like what you're even teaching and sharing. Um,
Sure.
but no, I really appreciate you coming on, Dan. Like this is highly valuable, and I'm excited for what you're doing and that we put out there. Let's see, the compass, the number 4 life.com, to reach out to you. Parent coaches, man, I get the utmost respect to you because I just see the need is everywhere, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think every parent should have a coach, not waiting until things are coming derailed. Um, unfortunately, I think that's the way we're wired. When things are
mhm,
painful, that's when we seek help.
yeah.
But for me, um, I want to have the most healthy connection with my kids possible. And like again, I think the way that God designed us is the relationship between parent and child, the relationships within a family are supposed to be healthy. It's supposed to be rewarding. Yeah, you go through trials, you have moments where things are bad, but the overwhelming majority should be fulfilling.
Yeah.
And so part of my mission is how do you restore peace, love, and joy back in the home? Because without you're not meant to tolerate stress for long periods of time without it starting to deteriorate the foundation of the family.
I love that, and that's a part of why I even have this podcast. It's like I have learned so much from other men being like you, being willing to share these tools or just some kind of wisdom that they've gleaned that it will advance people farther than you will by yourself by learning from people who've gone before you. Bring peace to your home. Like how good is that? Bringing peace into your marriage, restoring your relationship with your kids, doing great in your
Yeah,
business, like get everything firing. And it's not perfect at all times, but have tools in every category that's like, if you implement these tools, in 10 years, you are going to be better off. Like it's just going to be a way better experience than just winging it by yourself. And I guess I just always bring this up because me, people I know, people I've worked with, gone to church with, we do things on our own and it just doesn't, it's not ideal. So, um, I completely agree with you. Get coaches, get help. I probably bring that up almost every episode that, and actually I was going to say this, some of the guys I interview, when they start saying, oh no, we do the counseling stuff, even our marriage coaching or counseling, even in the good times. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's genius. That's going to the next
yeah,
level. Or hey, I got a 1-year old kid. Let me get this coaching now so that I don't end up like Jeff is saying. And it's like, ooh, my oldest son, I've got 13 years of like, man, what have I done? Right. Because it hasn't been this perfect, peaceful home. Like
yeah,
there's a lot of our story is um, my struggles with anger, my struggles with my wife, and then that flows into my kids. But had I had a different attitude where I would pay for coaching, right? Your Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Like, okay, if I truly love you, I would spend money to be or get the things I need to get, or you know, to bless you or to bless our home. Um,
mhm,
so, anyways, I love the mindset of getting the training before you're like in the foxhole, right? You're in the battle. Like, then you want to teach me about how to use this weapon
yeah,
appropriately? No. And the strategy that we're using as on the battlefield? No, you should have learned that like before you went to battle.
yeah. Well, and it's
So,
hard to implement and use these new tools when you're under an immense amount of stress. So I do like this idea of getting the training in equipping before you're on the battlefield, because then you're going to be able to like succeed. Like shoot,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like if you got all these years of training as being a fireman, like if I just showed up one day and we went into this raging fire, like I had no chance. I got
You'd
no
be
chance,
you'd
right?
be a huge liability, and
Yeah, I would.
you'd slow your team down, right?
Yeah,
Because it's
well,
like
like, and think about that too. We're the leaders of the family. Like, are we slowing our family down? Are we a liability to our family because we don't have the right tools
completely.
or training?
I'd
I
say
never thought of it like
100%.
that.
You are a liability because you didn't get educated on how to have a good marriage and talk like eh, this seems to be the resounding problem, but you talking, communicating when things are tough or something she does and you don't like, or he does and you don't like. You don't got that skill set, and maybe you're part of the 1% that are just born with it, right? Some people are wired that way, but a lot of us aren't. I completely think you're a liability. And then you don't know how to, that's the whole point. Faith, family, finances, and fitness. If you're not educated or even have a coach in all these areas, like how good are you going to do on your own versus we have thousands and thousands of years of human history and people that have gone before you. And I think God
Yeah,
designed mentorship. Like it was every generation passes it on. And if your parents didn't give it to you, go seek it out where it can be found, like searching
that's
for
a
wisdom.
yeah, that's a good point too. Because when you're talking, the thing that came up is like, um, I think part of why I do what I do is there's certain things I did not get from my parents, and this isn't like blaming, or it's just they didn't have the tools and they didn't have that knowledge and they didn't get the coaching.
Sure.
So I'm having to pay and invest and get mentors and coaches like to equip me to be able to handle the job that I'm faced with or that I'm blessed with or responsible for. But part of my vision is that I train and equip and give my kids the experience they need, so they need less of that when they become parents. They need
There
to
you
hire
go.
less mentors and coaches, or the coaches and mentors they have, take them to a different level, beyond what I could have ever done or modeled for
Exactly. And in the abundance of counselors, like war is won, right? That's like in Proverbs. You just don't always realize sometimes you got to like pay for the counsel, right?
them. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so even King Solomon, he charged like the world's kings came and paid, a tribute yearly, and they would come and hear him. Even the Queen of Sheba, it's like she came and paid just to hear the wisdom and then take it back to her kingdom and implement. You know,
Hmm.
um, anyways, that's a topic maybe for another day. So,
No, I
well,
like that.
Dan, I want to just thank you for coming on. I think this was truly valuable, and I think a lot of people should reach out, should get the coaching. I'm interested in the coaching my own self, um, and yeah, I just thank you for taking the time today.
Yeah, I love, love, love talking to other dads, other guys that want to be the best dads they can be and have a heart for helping families. So I could do this for another couple hours. I love it. Appreciate
That's awesome.
appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. All right. Well, to everyone out there, you know how to reach out to Dan. It's the compass, the number 4for life.com. Get on the newsletter. Get the coaching you need to be the father that you want to be, right? And I know you weren't born with it, like all the skills but you do have skills that, and everyone is good at something. But go get filled in with where you're lacking. And so put the work in today in your faith, family, finances, and fitness, whether it's just small steps so that in a year from now, you're thanking yourself for where you're taking your family, because you are the leader, you're the head of your home, and you're really the head of the marriage. And so take that responsibility on and go get the skills you need. So with that, we'll catch you on the next one.